So I've been out this morning for a quick session, caught a few small perch, caught loads of those little tiny pike about that big. I started to do my head in a little bit, to be honest with you. So, but rather than flogging a dead horse, I'll get a couple of clips together of some, not all, but some of the techniques and the lures that I like to use in really weedy situations. And we're not talking about floating weed like the duckweed. We're talking about thick bottom weed. So, sort of splitting it up into two categories. We'll look at search rigs, and we'll look at more like slow and methodical ways of picking the same areas apart once we've had a bite on either like a chatterbait, something like that. So on the search baits, my favourite search bait by far are crankbaits. I love a chatterbait. Chatterbaits definitely seem to catch a bigger average, but I catch a lot of fish on crankbaits. Now, a lot of crankbait fishing is about picking the right crankbait for the depth of water that you're fishing. So if I'm fishing a clean area with not too much weed and I'm fishing in 6 foot of water, I do like a crankbait that's going to dive a foot or two deeper than where I'm fishing, because I want it to sort of hit the bottom and deflect off of things and things like that. You'll often get that crankbait will hit something, deflect to the left or the right, and that will often trigger a bite. Problem is with weed fishing areas with a lot of bottom weed, it can be a bit of a nightmare, because all it takes is to, if you've got weed that's coming 4 foot off the bottom, your crankbait's fishing at 4 foot, it just takes that one little patch to come a little bit higher off, and then you're banging the weed again. See, like judging from this clip that I've showed you here, the area that I was fishing, just crankbaits were just not an effective way of fishing. 9 out of every 10 casts I had come back like that, so it was just completely pointless to carry on. So what do you do when you need a search bait to cover lots of water as quick as possible, but you know you're fishing as effectively as you can be for as long a period of time as you can be? It's definitely a chatterbait. Now, chatterbaits do perform really well in the weed. I've spoken no end about the gunky boomer, so I'm not going to go massively in depth about it, but that combination, gunky boomer with the gunky peps as a trailer, just trim the skirt down a little bit, really, really effective. You can let it sink right in the weed. A couple of pops with a rod tip, it's going to come out of the weed, shed any weed that it's picked up as it's landed. And the great thing about chatterbaits, when you're retrieving them, you will constantly feel the vibration in the rod tip. So if you're not feeling that, you know you've weeded up. So rather than doing an entire retrieve and then getting it back in, oh look, it's got weeded up, just reel it straight back in. Or before you do that, just give it a couple of taps with a rod tip again, and then see if you feel that vibration after that, because chatterbaits are very, very easy lures to shake that excess weed off. So when it comes to searching in weed, chatterbaits will always be my go-to, or my starting option. They catch big fish and they perform really well in the weed. Again, this is all about fishing to the situation, not always picking your favourite lures with your favourite techniques. It's all about fishing as effectively as possible for as long as possible. So sticking on to the theme of search baits or search techniques, that one there, the Gunky Kitty, we do a 5, a 7.5, and a 10 centimetre version. The 5 centimetre one, if you just want to go out and catch fish, that is a brilliant lure. But to fish it in this way, the issue with a 5 centimetre one is range. You know, you're looking at 15, 20 foot. That's if you've got a really good balanced setup. So that one there, just to go out and get some bites, a 7.6 version, really, really good lure. So we're using this one in the video with a size 1 hook. Now the reason we're using such a big hook with it, in my opinion, the size 2 is probably the best one to use. But because I wanted this lure to sink down as quickly as possible, and we're not using nail weights in them or anything like that, so we're actually using the hook to weight the lure as well. Chuck it out there, let it sink to the bottom. As soon as you've got slack in your line, a couple of jerks of rod tip, pause, a couple more jerks of the rod tip, pause again. And the thing is with that, although you were searching, but you are also fishing it a lot more, it's less obvious, it's a lot less, you're going to not get the vibration from it and all the flash that you get from the chatterbaits. So it's a much more subtle presentation. And if you want to fish on the surface with these, go to a size 2, cast it out, don't let it sink, and then just fish it like a jerk bait, like a water dog style, exactly how you would fish a water dog style top water bait. And if you tie this on a loop, so the hook sort of free running on a loop rather than fixed to the main line, it's going to give you a really, really nice side to side action. unbelievably effective. And in the coming months, you will see just how effective this lure is. I don't want to say too much on that, but these catch a lot of fish. So moving on from that, looking at the shads, again looking at the peps. If you was to put that on a jig head, and like we have done in this clip, cast it out, reel it in. Now, if you reel in really fast and you don't let it sink to like where the weed bed sort of starts, you can fish that the top couple of foot of water, no problems at all. The problem is if you want to hop it along the bottom or you want to fish it slower, you're just going to pick up loads and loads of weed, and again, you're not fishing effectively. So instead of a jig head, and again, I have covered this before, so I'm not going to go too in depth with it, but just a nail weight in the head, side hook on an EWG, cast. You don't want to be casting these out and reeling them straight back in, because if you're going to do that, you may as well just use a jig head if you're not going to let them sink. This is all about sort of picking an area apart, fishing slower. If the fish are not really on it, they're a bit more lethargic, just keeping your lure in the strike zone a bit longer. So nail weight, EWG, cast it out, let it sink to the bottom, a couple of turns of the reel handle, and then pause, and then just repeat that all the way in. Because this lure is so thin, or so narrow should I say, but it's quite deep in the body, it's the perfect shape to just sit on top of the weed. So with a jig head, that jig head, the first thing it wants to do is bury in it. This is just going to sit on the top of it. Because your nail weight's inside the lure rather than sort of outside on the head, the actual plastic around it acts as a bit of a cushion, a bit of like a parachute almost. So it doesn't allow it to sink in. It holds it and it just sits on top of the weed. Really, really effective. When you cast it, what I would do with these as well before you actually cast in, let it drop in the edge under its own weight. If you're not getting the tail kicking under the weight of that nail that you've stuck in there, the nail weight, take the nail weight out and stick a slightly heavier one in. What we do want is for that paddle to kick under the when it's sort of falling under its own weight. If it's not, again, you're just not fishing it as effectively as it could be. So just up the size of the nail weight. And again, you will still pick up a little bit of weed with these, but if you make 10 casts, 8 of them are coming back weed free. So again, you're fishing much more effectively than if you was just to persevere with that jig head. Now, going on to the last one, this is the Ilex Yummy Fish in 3-inch. Now, I really like this material that these are made out of, and there's a lot of lures that work well fish weightless, but one of the reasons why I think this one in particular works so well is because of the high level of salt that it's got in the material. It's quite heavy, even though that we're fishing out weightless, the lure itself is quite heavy, and you can cast this a mile. You can skip it under trees and things like that. So again, just rigging it Texas style, no weights, no nail weights, no need to. The two ways you can fish this, you can fish it quite aggressive where you cast it out, let it sink to the bottom, and a little bit like the kiddie, you're fishing it a little bit like a jerk bait. But where that really does come into its own, you're casting it out, let it sink to the bottom, keeping a fair bit of slack in your line so you've got like a nice bow in it. And what you want to be doing is shaking the slack quite aggressively. And then what that basically does is exactly the same how I fish the Neds in the summer. Is all that's doing is laid on the bottom, and when you're moving that slack, you're not moving the lure hardly at all. You're just making it quiver. So it's going to be sat on the bottom. You move that slack line, and it's just going to be doing that on the bottom. And it can be really, really effective if you found some really big lethargic fish. If nothing, if you can't get them to commit to a chatterbait or one of the kiddies fish quite aggressively, that just cast out really long pauses. Don't be afraid to leave it 10, 15, even 20 seconds sometimes. When I'm fishing a Ned rig, which I will fish almost the same as this, even though the rigging is completely different, there are times where I might be on one cast for maybe 3.5, 4 minutes, something like that, because I want it to stay in the strike zone for as long as possible. And if the fish are not really on it, just keeping it there like that can be really, really effective. So again, there are other options that we can talk about, but we can look at it in a later video. But just remember to fish the situation before you think about the fish. So if your favourite lure is, let's say, a Gunky Rockstar on a tiny jig head because you catch so many fish on it, although that's what will work in regards to the fish, if you're just going to keep picking weed every 1 or 2 casts, it's coming back covered in weed, you're just not fishing. You're not making the most of your time on the bank. So it's all about trying to get your lure to fish to its maximum as much as possible, and using these options. Again, if you have got some really weedy areas, just give them a go, see how you get on, and let us know in the comments. Cheers.